Sophia dragged herself out of her tiny apartment, where peeling paint and the relentless hum of traffic served as constant reminders of her reality. With a worn-out bag slung over her shoulder and a folder of documents that didn't even belong to her, she made her way through crowded streets toward the towering office building, the life she dreamed of. A life of stability and respect felt impossibly far away, swallowed by a daily grind of disregard and humiliation. The skyscraper, all glass and steel, loomed like a monument to a world Sophia didn't belong to. Inside, men and women in sharp suits moved with purpose, their conversations punctuated by words like money and finance, as if wealth were their shared language. To Sophia, money was the great divider, a force that determined who was noticed and who was invisible. Without it, she felt like an afterthought, just another cog in the wheel of a million-dollar corporation. Arriving at her desk, she tried to make herself as small as possible, hoping to avoid the attention of Arthur, the CEO. But as usual, he found her. "Sophia," he barked, shoving a stack of papers onto her desk without so much as a glance. "These should have been done yesterday. Do you think we handle billion-dollar finances with amateur work?" His words cut deep, but she merely nodded, biting her lip to keep from speaking. Speaking back meant risking everything, and she couldn't afford to lose her job, not with bills piling up. Arthur was everything Sophia despised: arrogant, cold, and utterly indifferent to the people around him. To him, employees like her weren't individuals. They were tools to be used and discarded. Whispers in the office hinted at his ruthless nature, how he slashed budgets and people's lives with the same efficiency. Sophia knew she was just another name on his long list of expendables. At lunch, Sophia sat alone in the corner of the cafeteria, poking at a sad sandwich. Around her, executives buzzed with animated discussions about cash flow and market shares. Their confidence was almost otherworldly. Sophia couldn't help but wonder how life might feel on the other side of that chasm. To them, she was invisible, but deep down, a flicker of resolve burned, an unwillingness to accept this invisibility as her fate. Her thoughts were interrupted when a hurried co-worker passed by, spilling coffee on her blouse. "Oh, sorry, Sophia," the woman muttered, barely pausing to glance at her. Sophia pressed a napkin to the spreading stain, swallowing the lump of frustration in her throat. It wasn't just the coffee, it was the indifference, the constant reminders of how little she mattered. By the end of the day, Sophia was emotionally and physically drained. The weight of her circumstances pressed on her as she walked home through dimly lit streets. A faded storefront caught her eye, its sign barely legible. Behind the dusty glass was a stack of used books, and for reasons she couldn't explain, Sophia felt drawn to them. Inside, the musty smell of paper filled her senses as she scanned the shelves. A book caught her attention. Starting from Scratch: Stories of Resilience and Wealth. Its battered cover and worn pages seemed to mirror her own state, but the title sparked something in her. Flipping through its pages, she found stories of ordinary people who had transformed their lives, not through luck, but through choices, grit, and a refusal to give up. She used her last few coins to buy the book and held it tightly on the walk home, as if it were a lifeline. That night, in her cramped apartment, she read the first chapter. The words lit a spark inside her, a sense that change wasn't just possible, it was necessary. She didn't know how, but she knew she had to break free. If you're as invested in Sophia's journey as I am, let me know in the comments what you think she should do next. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss what's coming. Sophia's story is only beginning, and the twists ahead will leave you speechless. Sophia's days stretched endlessly, blending into one another as the same routines repeated like clockwork. The suffocating predictability of her life threatened to consume her, but the book she'd found became a flicker of hope in the monotony. Each night, She devoured its pages, learning about people who had transformed their lives against impossible odds. Stories of struggle, determination, and triumph filled her with a quiet determination. The office, however, remained an unyielding battleground. Arthur's barked orders and cold demeanor were constants, and the dismissive glances from colleagues only deepened her sense of isolation. But Sophia had started to notice something she hadn't before: patterns in their conversations. She paid close attention to how they spoke about investments, budgets, and the company's financial strategies. Slowly, the language of money and finance, once alien, began to make sense. One morning, while organizing a pile of neglected documents in the break room, Sophia overheard a conversation that would change the trajectory of her life. Two senior executives were discussing an influential client, Helena Van Buren, a woman renowned for her business acumen and sharp instincts. "She's coming in today," one of them said. "We need to ensure everything's perfect. She doesn't tolerate incompetence." Helena's name stuck with Sophia as she went about her tasks. By afternoon, the office buzzed with the arrival of the high-profile client. Unlike the usual powerful figures who exuded arrogance, Helena carried herself with grace. Her commanding presence was undeniable, but it was her kindness that caught Sophia off guard. Their paths crossed when Sophia delivered coffee to the conference room. As she placed the tray on the table, her hand trembled slightly. Helena noticed. "Are you all right, dear?" she asked, her voice soft but penetrating. Sophia hesitated, unsure how to respond. "Yes, ma'am. Just a long day," she replied, trying to force a polite smile. Helena's eyes lingered on her, sharp and perceptive. "Long days shouldn't be spent like this," she said almost absently, before turning back to her meeting. Those words clung to Sophia's mind for the rest of the day. They echoed as she sat at her desk, watching the rain streak down the office windows. She couldn't shake the feeling that Helena had seen something in her, a potential she had long buried under self-doubt and exhaustion. A week later, the unexpected happened. Helena returned for another meeting, and to Sophia's surprise, approached her during a break. "Sophia, isn't it?" she asked. Sophia nodded, stunned that someone of Helena's stature remembered her name. "I have a question for you," Helena said, her gaze unwavering. "If you had the chance to do something entirely different, something that would change your life, what would you do?" The question took Sophia by surprise. She fumbled for words, her mind racing. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I've never thought it was possible." Helena tilted her head slightly, a small smile forming on her lips. "Well, it is," she said. "And when you're ready to believe that, come find me." She handed Sophia a business card and walked away, leaving her stunned. For the first time in years, Sophia felt something shift inside her. The walls of her monotonous existence seemed to crack just enough to let a sliver of light in. That night, as she reread the pages of her book, she found herself holding Helena's card, tracing the embossed letters with her fingers. The possibilities scared her as much as they excited her. She thought of the risks, the sacrifices, and the inevitable judgments from people like Arthur. But she also thought of freedom, the chance to take control of her life and leave behind the suffocating weight of being invisible. Sophia didn't sleep much that night. Her mind was alive with thoughts of what could be. For the first time, the routine she dreaded so deeply no longer felt inevitable. She was beginning to imagine a world where she could rewrite her story. And this time, she intended to be the one holding the pen. The air in Sophia's apartment felt heavy that morning, a reflection of the weight pressing on her chest. She stared at Helena's business card on the kitchen table, its glossy surface catching the weak sunlight streaming through the window. For days, she had debated whether to call. The temptation was undeniable, but fear whispered in her ear, reminding her of everything she could lose. The office was no refuge. Arthur's scathing remarks felt sharper, his disdain more palpable. He seemed to take pleasure in undermining her, as if sensing her growing discomfort. "If you can't handle a simple task, Sophia, perhaps you're in the wrong line of work," he sneered after rejecting a meticulously prepared report. The words lingered long after he walked away, confirming what she already knew: she had to leave. But how? That question gnawed at her through the day. By evening, her decision was made. Sophia packed her personal items into a small box, her hands trembling with a mixture of fear and defiance. With one last glance at the sterile cubicle, where she had spent years being overlooked, she walked to Arthur's office. The confrontation was brief. "I'm resigning," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Arthur looked up from his laptop, his expression blank for a moment before twisting into disbelief. "You're serious?" "Yes," she replied. He leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. "You think walking away will get you anywhere? You'll be begging for a job like this in no time. You're just another replaceable cog, Sophia. Remember that." She didn't respond. She didn't have to. Turning on her heel, she left his office, each step feeling lighter than the last. Outside the building, the cold evening air hit her like a wake-up call. The fear she had carried for so long began to dissipate, replaced by something unfamiliar: freedom. But freedom came with its own set of challenges. Without a paycheck, Sophia's finances were perilously thin. Her savings, meager as they were, wouldn't last long. Days turned into weeks as she scoured job boards, her confidence waning with each rejection. The words in her book about resilience felt hollow in the face of mounting bills and an empty fridge. Just when despair threatened to consume her, a call came that would change everything. "Helena Van Buren," the voice on the other end said. Sophia's breath caught. "I wasn't sure if you'd call," Helena continued, her tone warm yet matter-of-fact. "But I heard you left your job. Am I right to assume you're ready for something new?" Sophia swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. "Yes," she managed. "Good. Meet me tomorrow at this address." Helena gave her the details and hung up before Sophia could respond. The following morning, Sophia found herself standing in front of a sleek office building in a part of the city she rarely ventured to. Inside, Helena greeted her with a smile that exuded both confidence and kindness. "Let's cut to the chase," Helena began, motioning for Sophia to sit. "I've been watching you. You're smart, resourceful, and most importantly, hungry. I can teach you how to turn that hunger into results, but it won't be easy. Are you willing to put in the work?" Sophia nodded, her determination outweighing her doubts. "Good," Helena said, sliding a folder across the table. "This is your first step. Study it, understand it, and prepare to make decisions you've never had to make before. This isn't just about learning new skills. It's about rethinking how you see money, power, and yourself." The folder contained detailed case studies, financial strategies, and personal anecdotes from Helena's own rise to success. Sophia's head spun as she absorbed the complexity of the material, but for the first time, she felt like she was moving towards something tangible. As Sophia left the meeting, her mind buzzed with possibilities. The road ahead was daunting, but the thought of reclaiming control over her life gave her strength. She wasn't just running from her past anymore. She was running toward her future. And though she didn't yet know it, the decisions she would make in the days to come would change her life in ways she couldn't have imagined. Sophia's days were no longer filled with monotony, but with an unfamiliar blend of excitement and anxiety. The folder Helena had given her became her constant companion, its pages packed with information that felt both empowering and overwhelming. Terms like capital growth, diversification, and financial leverage danced before her eyes as she worked tirelessly to understand concepts that had once seemed incomprehensible. Each night, she studied until her eyes burned, her mind consumed with a hunger she hadn't felt in years. The words in the folder weren't just instructions, they were a key to unlocking a world she had never believed she could access. For Sophia, this wasn't just about mastering finances, it was about mastering herself. Helena, true to her promise, didn't make it easy. Their sessions were grueling, filled with rapid-fire questions and challenging scenarios designed to test Sophia's ability to think critically under pressure. "The world doesn't care about your excuses," Helena said one day, her tone sharp but not unkind. "If you want control, you have to take it. Nobody will hand it to you." Sophia absorbed every word, each lesson fueling a growing sense of purpose. She began to see connections between concepts she'd never considered before, realizing that the strategies Helena taught weren't just about money, they were about power. But the transformation wasn't without its struggles. Sophia wrestled with self-doubt, her mind often returning to the life she had left behind. The safety net of a stable, if soul-crushing job was gone, replaced by an unrelenting uncertainty. What if she failed? What if she wasn't as capable as Helena believed? Her doubts reached a breaking point one evening when she couldn't solve a particularly complex problem Helena had assigned. Frustrated and exhausted, she slammed the folder shut and buried her face in her hands. "You're thinking too small," a voice cut through the silence. Startled, Sophia looked up to see Helena standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "I don't know if I can do this," Sophia admitted, her voice trembling. Helena walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You can, but only if you stop letting fear dictate your decisions. Fear keeps people small, Sophia. You're meant for more than that." Those words lingered with Sophia long after Helena left. They echoed in her mind as she reopened the folder, determined to push through the discomfort. Slowly but surely, the pieces began to fall into place. Weeks turned into months, and Sophia's transformation became undeniable. Her posture straightened, her confidence grew, and the quiet determination in her eyes became impossible to ignore. She wasn't just learning about financial systems and business strategies. She was learning how to reclaim her agency, how to make decisions that would shape her future. During one of their meetings, Helena handed Sophia a new challenge, drafting a business proposal for a fictional company. It was an exercise, but Sophia treated it as if the stakes were real. For days, she worked tirelessly, poring over market research, financial projections, and strategic plans. When she presented the proposal to Helena, the older woman smiled for the first time in weeks. "You're starting to get it," she said. "This isn't just about numbers, it's about vision, and you're finally beginning to see yours." The acknowledgement felt like a small victory, a sign that she was on the right path. But Sophia knew there was still much to learn, and the stakes were about to get higher. Unbeknownst to her, Helena had bigger plans in motion, plans that would test everything Sophia had learned and push her into a world she was only beginning to understand. The city's skyline shimmered in the evening light as Sophia stepped out of the sleek black car, her heels clicking against the marble pavement of the hotel entrance. The towering building before her was nothing like the corporate skyscraper she had once called her prison. It was a symbol of success, luxury, and power, a world she had only recently begun to glimpse. Inside, the grand ballroom buzzed with energy. Sophia had been invited as Helena's guest to an exclusive gala, a gathering of the most influential figures in business and finance. She felt a pang of nervousness as she adjusted the fitted black dress Helena had insisted she wear. This wasn't just a social event, it was a proving ground. Helena greeted her near the entrance, her usual air of confidence unshaken. "You'll be fine," she said, handing Sophia a glass of champagne. "Tonight isn't about blending in, it's about standing out." Sophia nodded, her grip tightening around the glass. As she surveyed the room, her eyes caught a familiar figure. Arthur. He was standing near the center of the room, surrounded by a group of executives. His laugh was as sharp and grating as she remembered, his arrogance filling the space like a fog. For a moment, Sophia froze. The memories of his scorn and cruelty came rushing back, threatening to unravel her composure. But then she caught Helena's gaze from across the room, a silent reminder of how far she had come. Sophia took a deep breath and stepped forward, weaving through the crowd with a grace she hadn't known she possessed. She could feel eyes turning toward her, curious whispers trailing in her wake. Arthur didn't notice her at first. It wasn't until she was standing mere feet away that he finally looked up, his expression flickering with faint recognition before settling into polite indifference. "Good evening," she said, her voice calm but firm. Arthur frowned slightly, trying to place her face. "Do I know you?" he asked, his tone dismissive. Sophia smiled, a flicker of satisfaction lighting her chest. "We've met," she replied, before turning her attention to the others in the group. The conversation shifted quickly, with Sophia effortlessly holding her own among the industry's elite. She spoke about market trends and emerging opportunities with a confidence that surprised even herself. Arthur, for his part, remained silent, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. As the night went on, Sophia found herself moving through the crowd, engaging with people who would have once ignored her. Helena's training had prepared her well, giving her the tools to navigate this world with poise and intelligence. Toward the end of the evening, Sophia found herself standing on the balcony, gazing out at the glittering cityscape. She felt a strange mix of exhilaration and exhaustion, the weight of the night pressing on her shoulders. "Impressive," a voice said behind her. She turned to find Helena, her expression unreadable. "Thank you," Sophia replied, unsure of what else to say. Helena stepped closer, her eyes scanning the horizon. "You held your ground tonight, but this is just the beginning. The real challenge is coming, and it's going to take everything you've got." Sophia nodded, a flicker of determination lighting in her chest. She wasn't sure what Helena meant, but she knew one thing for certain: she was ready. Inside the ballroom, Arthur watched her from a distance, his expression dark with suspicion. He didn't know who this new Sophia was, but something about her unnerved him. He had underestimated her once, and the unease in his gut told him he might regret it. The morning sun pierced through Sophia's apartment window as she sat at her small desk, flipping through a stack of papers Helena had handed her the night before. They were densely packed with financial data and market trends, the kind of material she once would have found impenetrable. Now she pored over it with a focused intensity, marking key points and scribbling notes in the margins. Helena had given her a task: analyzing the potential acquisition of a struggling tech company. It was a test, Sophia knew that much. But something about this assignment felt different, heavier. It wasn't just a hypothetical exercise, it was preparation for a much larger game. By midday, Sophia's head was spinning. She pushed back from her desk and rubbed her temples, the enormity of what she was doing pressing down on her. She thought back to the gala, to the way Arthur had looked at her with confusion and something else, unease. The memory brought a faint smile to her lips. For the first time, she felt like she was no longer playing by his rules. A knock at the door startled her. She wasn't expecting anyone. Opening it, she found a courier holding an envelope with Helena's signature flourish on the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a brief cryptic message: "Meet me at this address. Bring your analysis." The location was a high-rise building in the heart of the financial district. Sophia arrived that evening, clutching her neatly prepared report. The receptionist directed her to a private conference room where Helena was waiting alongside a tall, sharp-dressed man she hadn't seen before. "Sophia, this is Victor," Helena said. "He's one of the top venture capitalists in the city. He's here because of you." Victor extended a hand, his gaze appraising. Helena's been telling me about your progress. Let's see if you're as good as she says. The room was quiet as Sophia began her presentation. Her voice wavered at first, but as she delved deeper into the details of her analysis, she found her confidence growing. She outlined the tech company's potential for turnaround, highlighting opportunities others might have overlooked. When she finished, Victor leaned back in his chair, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Impressive," he said, glancing at Helena. "She's sharp." Helena nodded, her expression unreadable. She's ready for the next step. Sophia's pulse quickened. "What next step?" she asked, unable to keep the edge of curiosity from her voice. Victor exchanged a glance with Helena before responding. "We're moving on the acquisition, and you're going to lead the initial negotiations." The words hit Sophia like a jolt. "Me?" "Yes, you," Helena said firmly. "This is your opportunity to prove that you're more than just a student. You have the knowledge, the instincts. Now you need to show the world." Sophia's mind raced as she left the meeting. Negotiating an acquisition was far beyond anything she had ever imagined herself doing. The stakes were high, and the margin for error was razor-thin. But beneath the fear was a flicker of excitement. Over the next week, Sophia immersed herself in preparation. She studied every detail of the tech company, anticipated every possible objection, and crafted responses for each one. By the time she walked into the negotiation room, she felt as ready as she'd ever be. The meeting was intense. The company's executives were skeptical, their questions sharp and unrelenting, but Sophia held her ground, countering each point with facts and insights she had painstakingly prepared. As the hours dragged on, something remarkable happened. Sophia realized she was no longer just reciting information. She was steering the conversation, guiding the narrative in a way that felt almost natural. When the final terms were agreed upon, Sophia leaned back in her chair, a wave of exhaustion and pride washing over her. She had done it. That evening, Helena called her. "Congratulations," she said, her voice warm. "You've just taken your first real step into this world. But don't get comfortable. The stakes only get higher from here." As Sophia hung up, her thoughts drifted to Arthur. She wondered how he would react when he learned that the acquisition had been backed by Helena's firm and that Sophia had played a key role. Unbeknownst to her, Arthur had already caught wind of the deal. His curiosity about Sophia had turned into something darker, a need to know who she had become and why she was suddenly a player in a game he thought he owned. The office of Van Buren Ventures buzzed with quiet intensity as Sophia stepped inside. It had been weeks since the successful negotiation of the tech company acquisition, and the ripple effects of the deal were still being felt across the industry. Helena's firm had made headlines, and Sophia's role, while not publicized, had not gone unnoticed within certain circles. Sophia had barely settled at her desk when Helena's assistant appeared at the door. "Helena wants to see you." Now, in Helena's expansive office, the atmosphere was charged. On her desk lay a folder, its contents spilling out, a detailed proposal for a new project that at first glance appeared far more ambitious than the acquisition Sophia had just completed. "This," Helena said, sliding the folder across the desk, "is your next challenge." Sophia picked it up, her eyes scanning the document. It detailed plans for a joint venture with a luxury real estate firm, one with a checkered reputation but undeniable potential. The project was massive, involving a network of investors and millions of dollars at stake. Her heart raced as she looked back at Helena. "You want me to handle this?" "I want you to lead it," Helena said, her tone leaving no room for doubt. "This isn't just about numbers or strategy, Sophia. It's about influence. If you can pull this off, you'll prove you belong in this world." Sophia spent the next several days buried in work, The project's complexity was staggering, requiring her to navigate everything from investor relations to intricate financial models. She reached out to Victor for guidance, and together they dissected every aspect of the venture. As the pieces began to fall into place, Sophia felt a growing sense of ownership over the project. For the first time, she wasn't just executing someone else's vision, she was shaping her own. But success in this world came with enemies, and Sophia's ascent had not gone unnoticed. Arthur, who had remained an unsettling presence in the background, began to take a more active interest in her activities. Through back channels, he learned of her involvement in the upcoming deal. Late one evening, as Sophia reviewed investor profiles in her apartment, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. Hesitant, she answered. "Hello, Sophia," came the familiar cold voice. Arthur, her grip tightened on the phone. "What do you want?" "I've been hearing your name a lot lately," he said, his tone laced with mockery. "It seems you've been busy. Very impressive, really. But I wonder, do you really think you're ready for what you're getting into?" Sophia's stomach churned, but she refused to let him see her fear. "I guess we'll find out." Arthur chuckled, the sound low and menacing. "We will, but let me give you a piece of advice. This world isn't kind to people who don't know their place." The call ended, leaving Sophia shaken but resolute. Arthur's words were a reminder of the stakes, but they also fueled her determination. She wasn't the same timid secretary he had dismissed. The project's first investor meeting was held at an exclusive country club, a place dripping with wealth and prestige. Sophia arrived early, her presentation meticulously prepared. As the room filled with potential investors, she felt their eyes on her, assessing, judging. When it was time to speak, Sophia stood with a confidence she hadn't known she possessed. She walked them through the proposal, answering their questions with precision and insight. The room was silent as she finished, the investors exchanging glances before one finally spoke. "I'm in," he said, his voice breaking the tension. One by one, the others followed, their agreement solidifying the project's foundation. As Sophia walked out of the meeting, a wave of relief and triumph washed over her. But she knew better than to celebrate too soon. Arthur's words lingered in her mind, a reminder that success often painted a target on one's back. Later that evening, as she recounted the day's events to Helena, her mentor smiled. "You did well," Helena said, "but be prepared. People like Arthur don't take kindly to being outplayed." Sophia nodded, her resolve hardening. She wasn't just playing the game anymore, she was rewriting the rules. In his corner office, Arthur stared at a report on the joint venture, his jaw tight with frustration. Sophia had become more than an annoyance. She was a threat, and threats in his world were meant to be eliminated. The hum of activity in the office was relentless. Sophia's project had moved into its critical phase, and every decision carried weight. Investors were watching, analysts were speculating, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Sophia had worked tirelessly to ensure the venture's success, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was looming, something just out of sight. Helena's words echoed in her mind. "Be prepared. People like Arthur don't take kindly to being outplayed." And Arthur had been conspicuously quiet, too quiet. Sophia pushed the thought aside as she entered the conference room for yet another meeting. Charts and projections lined the walls, and the table was cluttered with reports. Victor was already there, reviewing documents with his usual laser focus. "This is the final stretch," he said, not looking up. "If we can close this deal, it will cement your reputation." Sophia nodded, setting down her laptop and opening her notes. "What's the status on the regulatory approvals?" "They're on track," Victor replied. "But we've hit a snag with one of the key investors. He's hesitating, and I don't think it's just about the numbers." Sophia frowned. "Who?" "James Albright," Victor said, sliding a file across the table. "He's been uncharacteristically quiet. I've seen this before. It usually means someone's whispering in his ear. The name sent a chill down Sophia's spine. Albright was a significant player in the venture, and his withdrawal could destabilize the entire deal. As she flipped through the file, her stomach sank. Arthur. His fingerprints were all over the situation, subtle but undeniable. He had been leveraging his network to sow doubt among her investors, planting seeds of distrust and misinformation. The realization ignited a fire within Sophia. She wasn't going to let him sabotage her, not this time. "Let's set up a meeting with Albright," she said firmly. "I want to address his concerns directly." Victor hesitated. "Are you sure? If Arthur's involved, he'll be expecting you to make a move." "Let him," Sophia replied, her voice steely. The meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon at an upscale restaurant frequented by the city's elite. Sophia arrived early, reviewing her notes one last time. She had prepared for every possible objection, every question Albright might throw her way. When Albright arrived, his demeanor was guarded, his smile polite but distant. Sophia wasted no time, diving into a detailed presentation of the venture's progress and potential. She anticipated his concerns, addressing them with precision and confidence. But as the conversation progressed, she noticed his hesitation. He wasn't fully convinced. "James," she said, her tone softening, "I know you've heard things, doubts about my capabilities, questions about my experience, but let me ask you this. Have you ever seen me fail to deliver?" Albright studied her for a long moment before leaning back in his chair. "No," he admitted, "you haven't." "Then trust me," Sophia said. "This venture isn't just a deal, it's a vision, and I'm asking you to be part of it." There was a beat of silence before Albright nodded. "All right," he said. "I'm in." Relief flooded Sophia, but she knew better than to celebrate. This wasn't just a victory, it was a declaration of war. Arthur wouldn't back down after this. That night, Sophia met with Helena to debrief. As they reviewed the day's events, Helena's expression grew serious. "Arthur isn't just playing games," she said. "He's testing your limits, and he won't stop until he finds a way to break you." Sophia nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then I'll make sure he doesn't." Meanwhile, in his office, Arthur sat in the dim light, his hands steepled in thought. The news of Albright's decision had reached him, and his frustration was palpable. "She's better than I expected," he muttered to himself. "But everyone has a breaking point. I just need to find hers." Unbeknownst to Sophia, Arthur was already laying the groundwork for his next move, a move that would challenge everything she had worked for. The office was unnervingly quiet. Sophia sat at her desk, staring at the screen as a wave of unease crept over her. The numbers weren't adding up. The financial projections for the joint venture, once rock solid, were suddenly riddled with inconsistencies. It was as though someone had deliberately tampered with the data. Helena's voice on the phone was calm but firm. "Check everything. Someone is trying to undermine us, and I don't need to guess who." "Arthur." Sophia's chest tightened as she pored over the files. His hand in this was unmistakable. Leveraging his vast network, he had orchestrated a subtle but devastating attack on the venture. Fake reports, altered projections, and whispers of financial instability had begun circulating among the investors. The carefully built foundation of trust Sophia had worked so hard to establish was starting to crack. Victor burst into her office, his usual calm demeanor replaced with urgency. "We have a problem," he said, tossing a report onto her desk. "Arthur's team is spinning a narrative that this venture is a financial liability. If we don't respond fast, we'll lose more investors." Sophia's mind raced. "How many have we lost already?" "2," Victor replied, "and a third is on the fence. If they pull out, the entire deal could collapse." Sophia clenched her fists. She had come too far to let Arthur win now. "We're going to fight this," she said, her voice resolute. Schedule a meeting with every remaining investor. I want to address this head-on. The meeting took place in a towering boardroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The tension in the air was palpable as Sophia entered, her heart pounding in her chest. She had spent the entire night preparing, armed with data to refute every lie Arthur had planted. As she spoke, her voice steady and unwavering, she laid out the truth behind the numbers. She addressed the rumors directly, dismantling them with cold, hard facts. Slowly, she saw the skepticism in the room begin to waver. But it wasn't enough. Halfway through her presentation, the doors swung open and Arthur strode in, his presence filling the room like a storm. He moved with calculated confidence, his expression a mix of amusement and thinly veiled hostility. "Apologies for the interruption," he said, his voice smooth. "I couldn't resist stopping by to see how this venture of yours is progressing." Sophia met his gaze, refusing to back down. "We're doing just fine, thank you," she said, her tone razor-sharp. Arthur chuckled, shaking his head. "I wonder if your investors feel the same way." He turned to the room. "Have any of you considered the long-term risks here? This market is volatile, and Sophia, while ambitious, is inexperienced. Do you really want to gamble your money on someone who's still learning the game?" The room fell silent, his words slicing through the progress Sophia had made. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "The only gamble here," she said, her voice cutting through the tension, "is trusting someone who thrives on fear and manipulation. Arthur wants you to believe that I'm the risk, but the real risk is allowing him to dictate your decisions. This venture isn't about me, it's about opportunity, growth, and vision, and I believe in it, just as you should." For a moment, the room remained still. Then one by one the investors began nodding, their faith in Sophia visibly returning. Arthur's jaw tightened, his calculated disruption backfiring. He stood there for a moment longer, his gaze locked with Sophia's, before turning and walking out without another word. After the meeting, Helena called Sophia. "You handled that well," she said, "but Arthur's not done. He's desperate now, and desperation makes people dangerous." Sophia leaned back in her chair, the adrenaline of the confrontation giving way to exhaustion. She knew Helena was right. Arthur had just escalated the stakes, and the next move would be his. In his penthouse office, Arthur poured himself a drink, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "She's smarter than I gave her credit for," he muttered. "But every empire has its weak point. I'll find hers." And as he stared out over the city, a twisted smile spread across his face. The tension in the room was electric as Sophia entered the final investor meeting, the culmination of months of work, relentless preparation, and countless battles boiled down to this moment. The fate of the joint venture, and perhaps Sophia's entire future, hung by a thread. Arthur had made his move. Leaks about Sophia's past had spread through the industry like wildfire. Her humble beginnings, the humiliation she'd endured as a secretary, the years of invisibility. He had framed it as evidence of her inability to lead at this level, weaponizing her history to undermine her hard-earned credibility. Sophia had spent the previous night pacing her apartment, battling doubt. The weight of Arthur's campaign against her was suffocating, but Helena's voice rang in her ears. "This isn't just about proving him wrong, it's about proving yourself right." She stood at the head of the table, scanning the faces of the investors. Some looked skeptical, others curious, but none seemed ready to abandon her outright. "Before we begin," Sophia said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her, "I want to address the rumors." The room stilled. "Yes, I started as a secretary," she continued, meeting their gazes one by one. "Yes, I've faced setbacks and failures, but let me ask you this. What makes a better leader? Someone handed success, or someone who's had to fight for every inch of it?" She let the question linger, the silence amplifying her words. What Arthur doesn't understand is that my past isn't a weakness, it's my strength. It's why I know how to adapt, how to persevere, and how to create value in situations others would dismiss. That's what this venture is about, not just resilience, but transformation. For a moment, the room was silent. Then, one investor leaned forward, his expression softening. "I've seen enough to know when someone is worth betting on," he said. "And Sophia, I'm betting on you." One by one, the others followed suit, their support solidifying the deal. Sophia felt a surge of relief and triumph as the final signatures were added, sealing the agreement. But the victory was bittersweet. She knew Arthur wouldn't let this go. Later that evening, Sophia received a call from Helena. "Congratulations," Helena said. "You've done something extraordinary. But be careful. Arthur won't take this loss lightly." And Helena was right. The next day, Sophia received an unexpected invitation to a private meeting. It was from Arthur. Against her better judgment, she accepted, knowing this confrontation was inevitable. They met in his office, the same one where years ago he had dismissed her as insignificant. The contrast was striking. This time, Sophia was an equal, if not his superior. Arthur leaned back in his chair, studying her with a mixture of frustration and admiration. "You've surprised me," he said finally. "You've built something impressive. But let me ask you this. Do you really think you can sustain it?" Sophia met his gaze, unflinching. "Not only can I sustain it," she said, her voice firm, "I'll surpass anything you've ever built." Arthur's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine unease. He had underestimated her for the last time. As Sophia left his office, the city lights stretched before her, each one a reminder of how far she had come. The battle with Arthur wasn't over, but she no longer feared him. She had proven to herself and to the world that she was capable of anything. What did you think of Sophia's journey? Did her resilience inspire you? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next story filled with twists, triumphs, and unforgettable moments.